All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of The Urban Gardener. I want to thank you all so much for joining me here today on this episode. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. In fact, hit that bell notification right next to it to follow along with more garden adventures as we continue growing here this season. On today's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to shoot part of a summer garden tour and get a good look at all of the things that we've got growing here in the urban gardens. I just picked a nice basket of beans right out of our bean patch that we've got growing here on the back patio. I mean, there's so many beans growing in there. I'm gonna have to go get another container and get the rest of them up out of there, because you know that's the one thing you really want to do if you got beans, is you want to keep picking them as they come up, because they'll get more growing. They slow down production if you're not picking them. So let's take a look around here on the back patio area to get us started on our summer garden tour. We've got a lot of great things growing on here. I did mention in episodes previous about how we kind of got a late start to everything this year, but things seem to be growing along just fine. There are some things that aren't really growing that we're going to take a look at as we're looking around the different garden spaces that we've got going here. But let's get growing and check out what we've got growing on here in our back patio right now. Take a look at this. This was a volunteer radish, and I'm sure it came from the radishes I grew right over on the other bed over here this last winter. I'm sure a seed got in here. But look at this thing. It is literally monstrous. And of course this is really overgrown, and it's probably not as tasty, probably really bitter as any other fruit would be, but this thing is solid. Look at these leaves. Big, huge, amazing leaves. It's been growing through this hot heat that we've got growing on here this summer. And look at this. It has not even gone to seed yet. It's just producing new leaves, which are edible, and the smaller ones are pretty good, but hasn't even gone to seed yet. Usually under the pressure of heat like this, a radish being a cool weather crop is gonna go to seed. So this is a very heat resilient variety. So I'm gonna keep this one in here. I'm gonna keep growing it, and I'm going to try to force it eventually to go to seed, collect and save those seeds for my crops I grow this next year. Now, right behind this amazing radish, in one of our smaller wood containers that we've got here, as you can see, we've got a nice sized zucchini growing. Decent little zucchini plant that was left over from my squash starts that I had. So I thought I would see how well it would grow in this small space. Now, as you'll see in our other video when we show the other zucchini plant, that'll be more part of our tomato video, because it's growing along the back fence line. So I'll be covering it with that one in our other part of the summer garden tour. But you'll see that the zucchini plant's kind of small, even though it looks like it's a really good size for being in our back patio there. It's really small compared to its brother or sister, I guess, that's growing on the back fence line there. So check out our next episode of our summer garden tour to check out that plant. But this one's doing pretty good. I need to get this fruit cut off of there. Hopefully it'll force it to produce some more fruits for us. But that's a pretty nice one so far. And right over here in our 5-gallon buckets. We've got some Brussels sprouts that we've got growing. And they're just basically hanging out here during the summertime, trying to wait for the cooler weather to come. At that point in time, it'll stretch out a lot more where all these new leaves, it'll grow probably right up out of those cages there. And it'll be in those sprouts that we'll be looking to harvest as we get more towards the colder season in our fall gardening. So next to our Brussels sprouts growing here in the back patio, we've got this peach tree. Now we planted out this peach tree as we found at the garden center in an earlier episode. I'll find that and put an iCard up right now so you can check out the episode where we planted out this peach tree. Now at first I was really worried about this thing. When I first planted it and pruned it and got it put into the pot, it took forever for it to show any signs of life at all. I literally thought this plant was dead after months of it not doing anything. Then all of a sudden, it just started sprouting new leaves, new branches, and has just amazingly come to life. So now I'm really looking forward to the next couple of seasons and seeing if we can get some fruits to ripen up off of this plant here. Back here behind the peach tree in our back patio, we've got a couple of pepper plants we'll talk about in our next episode. So remember, look for part 2 of this summer garden tour. But we've got this trellis here. And as you can see, growing up it right now is a sugar baby watermelon. And we've got one melon growing right there. It's just pretty much hanging there. And I'm gonna have to find some sort of support for this melon because the weight, the plant just did not seem to hold one that I had forming and growing. It was down here, it was hanging there. I was hoping that the plant had the strength to hold it, but ultimately it didn't. So we ended up having to, or it ended up falling off of the plant actually. So I don't want that to happen to this one here. So I'm gonna go find some sort of support or something like that, or figure something out. If you got any ideas or comments about that, let me know what I should do right down below in the comment section. But we'll get that supported up so we can get a watermelon growing off of that. And here, growing next to the melons, you can see here we've got these are a lemon cucumber. We got some pretty decent plants growing coming out of the bucket down below. And it's climbing its way up the side of the house here. There's a fruit forming right down here. Oh, and some more over here. So it's got a few fruits that are getting started and growing there. And this is probably the optimum time to start picking them off of the plant. It didn't necessarily form all the way as it should have there, but it's starting to get yellow on the top there. So at that point you want to pull these off of the plant before they ripen up too much. Cucumbers, having them underripe is the best way to pick them off of your plants. The same variety over here, we've got another lemon cucumber growing up the trellis. And into our other above ground raised bed that we have here, all the way around and out, and trying to head out the side of it there. But I'm still yet to see much as far as any fruit production off of this variety or this plant. It's the same lemon cucumber variety as the other, but not seeing anything. And in that above ground raised bed that we have here, we've got our Brussels sprouts that we've got growing inside this planter box. So other than the buckets that we got, I wanted to see how well they would grow out of the planter box. We've got a couple of really big, decent sized plants growing here. A couple just a little bit smaller, and they're not growing as well because these guys have been dealing with, see, aphids. Now recently I've showed in my last episode the garden, and everybody thought everything was green and no bug damage and all that sort of stuff. And I just wanted to show you guys, no, I do deal with a lot of this sort of stuff. These sort of pressures I'm dealing with every single season. But we're just learning more and more about how to deal with them and take care of them in a more organic way. I don't like using chemicals. So one of my primary methods of taking care of aphids or anything on my plants is just to wash and wash and wash them off. A plant like Brussels sprouts can take a pretty good washing constantly, but you got to get into these nooks and crannies, and you've got in all of these little curls. And the plant's going to curl up more the more these guys are doing damage to the plant, and then the more they hide inside of those curls. Get in there and wash them out, and wash at least once a day. You should be able to hold back those pressures, as I was able to with these ones. But I didn't get to these plants in time before the pressure really started to hit them, because it hit these plants first, moved on towards them, but by the time it moved on to them, I had started washing really well and was able to keep up with them over on these plants. But these ones already had taken a pretty good hit. But we'll see what happens as the season continues to go, and see if it perseveres through the pressure, and see if we get some nice Brussels sprouts growing on them. So you see in here, there's some forming there. But again, like I said, I'm also looking for the cooler season to start coming in, as this plant will stretch out and grow a lot more. And then at that time, they'll form our newer sprouts that we'll actually be looking to harvest and eat up later on this winter season. And below that, I've got this plant here. A Brussels sprout, a something, I'm not sure. It's not really, I mean, there's some little sort of nodes or something there or whatnot, but I'm not sure exactly what we've got going on there. Let's take a look right over here. We've got our wood trellis towers that we built earlier this season, that we've got our cucumbers growing up into. And we've got about, I think there's 2 or 3 plants in each of these different above ground raised beds. So altogether, I think about 6 plants growing. And they're doing really well, climbing right up the trellises. And actually the tallest one going there is this watermelon that we've got growing on the other side. I'll show you in a minute. Take a look at these cucumbers we got to start pulling off here. These are big, long, slicing cucumbers that we've got growing here. A little one here, just getting started. Some more in there. And another really big one. This one's a little overgrown. I'll have to take this one off the plant right away. Definitely do that. And let's see here. Around this way, we got some more. Another one just getting going there. Look at this one here. This is bad pollination. These sort of forms when it does this sort of stuff here. And let's see what else. I got another one. Oh, look, here's another really good one though. This is probably your perfect time to pick this variety here. About just the right size there. Be careful though, cucumbers do got lots of little spikes all over them. Oh yeah, here's another example of some bad pollination right here. Yeah, so those aren't going to be developing like they should. But we've got some pretty good ones growing on there. And again, like I said, tallest plant we got growing out of there is this watermelon. That's been vining itself all the way through there. And like the one we got on the other trellis, we've got another sugar baby watermelon there forming. And it's probably stretching really good on that vine there, so I have to find something to hold that up as well as the other one. And it's growing right down here in our other little wooden box that we've got. Kind of growing out this way too, trying to head off that way, but really taking off up into that trellis. So it's gonna be nice to have that little fruit there, that watermelon. We'll see how that does. But here we've got our, I'll pull back here real quick. Another one of our above ground raised bed boxes, a 4x2. I showed this in the last episode as well, our beans. They're just growing really, really well. As you saw, I picked a bunch of beans, and there's still a bunch in here to be taken too. If you look over here, look at all of those back there. Still more to be pulled out of there. Another one of my pests. I don't know if you can see on camera flying around. Let's see if I can shake it around a little bit more. I don't know if you can see those guys, but they're little white flies. I haven't had much of an issue with them in seasons past, but this year they seem to be all over the place. You can kind of see them hanging out on the leaves there. They don't seem to be causing any damage or really any problems. They're all over the place, flooding around when you move the plants around and all of that. But our plants are doing really well, producing really good. Another update, these are our beans growing in our trellis, as I talked about in our last episode, which I just filmed only about a week ago. They're already just growing a lot more, twisting around, turning around. So as I said then, before we know it, they're climbing up the fence line there, and back into this old thing too. Here, it's been sitting here for the last couple of years, still got the dirt in it. Fun little project. Only works if you've got like a mister or something that can keep that thing constantly wet. Just dries too fast. Dries out way too fast to be growing anything in my climate. And actually right down here too is we had the other vining bean, which we're fighting to find behind the squash plant that's growing from the other side of the fence. But our spaghetti squash down here is developing real nicely, and the beans are trying to find their way through here. So again, you can see, if you can see them just flying around everywhere, that white fly just buzzing around everywhere. Yeah, vines are starting to grab hold. There's bean there too. Well, hopefully that'll fill up here real quick too. Now you can see where that spaghetti squash is going through the fence there, getting through to the other side. But it's growing here. We got some of our lamb's tail. This stuff is so soft, so soft. Here's another spaghetti squash, developing nicely. As you can see, again, I deal with not just the pest pressure, but all of the other garden diseases that you might see. And this here is one of the most common ones. I'm going to talk about this here with the spaghetti squash. I've got another plant I'll show you in our next episode, if you keep an eye out for that, as we continue this summer garden tour, talk about our tomatoes and peppers. I've got another plant on the back fence line that's dealing with the same type of powdery mildew. I'll put that right here. powdery mildew pressure. Now, this is a fungus disease that's really, really common in gardening. Now, one thing I saw recently, though, on one of my favorite channels, Ray Browning talked about powdery mildew in his garden as he showed his lilacs in a recent episode on his channel. Now, Ray says that powdery mildew isn't going to be too much of a problem, and that you can just kind of let it go. I'm going to experiment that with a little bit there with these couple of plants that I've got that are really dealing with it right now, and kind of see how that goes. But from what I've read, that as they get to be really, I mean, look at this leaf. Now that stuff is really getting into that leaf and putting a lot of pressure in there on its ability to grow and provide the rest of the plant its nutrients. Some of the other leaves are just yellowing and dying off. I'm not too sure exactly if it has to do with any of that pressure or maybe something else. But yeah, I'm just gonna let it go and see how well it does. I mean, we do got a couple of decent fruits on this plant already, so we'll just have to see. And again, just another quick update. We did just film this on our last episode. Our corn growing in our side garden plot here. We got lots of really nice looking ears developing off of this plant. Getting about 2 and on some and just 1 on others. We've got several ears growing on all of these different plants, so we got a late start planting them out. But they're looking really, really nice. Can't wait to dig into that and see how well that tastes. And again, we've got ourselves another squash plant. And the one thing we don't see here is that other squash is just right over there. The wind's blowing and everything, so I'd be worried about some of those powdery mildew spores finding this plant over here. But it doesn't seem to. Plant looks really, really healthy. Just like the other vining squash, it's finding itself into other parts of our garden. And let's see here. Do believe we've got, there we are, a little baby butternut already there forming. So we do got 1 fruit. I haven't seen any others. Got several little flowers. So maybe we'll look for maybe another fruit or so to form, but we'll see. So I've got this small garden plot right here in between the 2 carports. Planted out a few different pepper plants. A couple of them back here didn't grow very well before the sun started pulling back behind this wall here, so they're really shaded out. They're not going to grow very well. These 2 in the front are still getting some pretty good sun. And this one's growing pretty well now and starting to put off a couple of poblano peppers there. I'm showing these couple of peppers in this part of the garden tour, but we'll cover most all the peppers and tomatoes in our other episode coming up on those in part 2 of this garden tour. But I wanted to show this plot because of this plant here. Now this here is a celery. I grew this celery out this last winter, and this year it's put out a bunch of seed. And I mean a bunch of seed. This is all just little seed. Let me grab some off here. I'll show you here. It's just, that is a ton of celery pepper seed. It's finding itself all the way down into the soil below it there. So I imagine coming up here, probably even this fall, we might start seeing actual baby celery plants start to pop up all over the place. We'll have to thin those out and hopefully have a nice little plot of celery coming up here in this fall winter garden this year. So right there in our last episode, I built out our little bean trellis there. And we've got this back fence line here my neighbor let me use to put up some of these 5-gallon water wicking buckets that we have here. I'll put an iCard right above right now to the video we did where we put those together. These are really good bucket systems and grow plants really, really well, especially in some of this really hot, dry heat. You're able to keep a nice store of water down below in our second bucket there that helps keep all the soil nice and moist for these plants here. I want to look at these 3 different plants we've got growing right here. Right here, and this one here, we've got a cantaloupe that's growing out of this bucket along with this eggplant that we've got here. And again, with the watermelons, these are probably going to get pretty weighty, pretty heavy there. So I'm going to find some way to maybe even take this plant down, let that settle into the bucket, or maybe down here or something like that, in order to take the weight off of that vine there and hopefully not lose that fruit. So that should be a pretty good water or cantaloupe there. But here we've got one of our first little eggplants here growing. If you see right back here, it's already got a really nice fruit here forming. It's got this just really dynamic purple color to it. And right up above it there, as you can see, this is one of the flowers that just got pollinated. And it's starting to form another eggplant there. We've got just a bunch more flowers. We got these really nice, and these ones are just starting to dry up a little bit, but they're just these big, beautiful purple flowers. We got a bunch of them already starting to settle in and grow more eggplants for us here. So this plant might produce us quite a big amount of eggplant. And right next to it, as you can see, this one here, another eggplant, same variety. Look how big that sucker is. Still stretching, still getting bigger. Behind it too, we got another one there. And again, like I said in the previous episode where I showed these, they just have these wonderful, awesome big leaves. Really soft, sort of like that lamb's tail I just showed a minute ago. And right next to it is here another big plant that sprawls out all over the place, really stretching itself out. This here's a ground cherry plant, sort of like a tomatillo that we have growing another part of our garden. These are like little lantern pods that grow the fruit inside of the pod. This here is going to dry up, and this here is called ground cherry, and there's a reason why. Once they dry up, those pods fall right to the ground. Here's a nice dry one there. And inside of that, it's a nice little yellow cherry fruit. They got kind of like a little pineapple peach type of flavor to them. As you can see, they're falling all over the place now. Got a bunch of them there, and as you can tell on the plant, they're putting out more and more flowers, more and more pods all over the place. So ground cherries are going to be dropping like snow here real soon. So now in our very back, on the back side of our fence line in the back alley, I'm going to show you another one of our squash plants. I believe this one's another one of the spaghetti squash that's growing on the other side of the fence line. Again, another plant that I will show in the very next episode of our garden tour. So stay tuned and look out for that. We'll show you where this plant actually starts from. Look at it, it's going crazy all over the place, just vining itself all up right through that fence there. But another quick update on the corn. It's growing back here in the back alleyway. Now, just a week ago, it was probably about this tall, and I was talking about how any moment it's going to start forming its tassels, the pollen tassels here. Now all the plants are starting to shoot those out. Once, as I mentioned in the video before, once the plant starts producing those tassels, it just really starts to stretch out. And these tassels come out, and all this pollen starts to form along the way. A lot of this isn't even developed yet, but it is releasing small amounts already, as you see this stuff that's just dangling here. Slowly releasing pollen all around through the whole group. And that's why you plant corn in groups like this, and so that they can all contribute their pollen to all the different ears that'll start forming on the plants after the tassels start popping up. As you see right here, there's one of our ears already coming up, and it's got all of the corn silk starting to pop out of the ear there. This will continue to come out and continue to collect this pollen. It's just really, in fact, I can see it in the sunlight blowing around right now. I don't know if you can really see it on the leaf here, but there's just pollen just floating around all over within this group of plants. And each one of those hairs is trying to catch a bit of that pollen in order to form each of your little kernels on your ear of corn. So that process is just getting started on this stand of corn here. Now, along the way here, we'll talk about these guys. These are eggplants. Planted, seeded, same time as the ones that are growing in the 5-gallon water wicking buckets we just looked at. Now, I don't know if they're just having a hard time because of the timing that they were planted or not, but I've got a couple over here too. They're about medium size, and they're still getting some really nice leaves. In fact, it looks like it's starting to form an actual eggplant there. I see a couple of things going on with fruits over on this one. It's really just not that big as the other ones that we got growing. Now obviously too, one of the things you can tell is those other ones are really in some south-facing sunlight, getting some bright full sun. And these guys are back here just kind of getting partial sun. I'd say full sun to a certain extent. They're getting about the 6 hours that the full sun you would expect them to get, but they're just not doing that well. Now this one's kind of a surprise to me here. Zucchini squash that I planted out. It wasn't a very good start, wasn't doing very well. Came out here, was dealing with some more bug pressure and all of that. Slugs and snails just love to eat on these things when they're little. But man, it's just blowing up. It's getting bigger and bigger by the day. If we look right in there, got some more zucchini. Look at this, that is huge. Now that zucchini is a bit bigger than you want it to be harvesting it. In fact, again right here, this one's probably just the right size for cooking with. But the plant's producing more and more of new fruits. So we get those big ones off of there, let the plant put its energy into those other fruits. So up underneath of our carport, more of our raised beds here above ground. We've got these different varieties of kohlrabi growing. Got some purple ones here. Another one of the white ones. It's not growing as big as this big one here. I mean, that's a big size plant there. But it's about time to pull these out, get all these plants taken out, clear out this bed and get it ready for planting out some different types of greens and things that we're going to get started for our fall planting this year. Still got a bunch of our bunching onions and our different cucumbers growing up our trellis that we've got here. Put in. There's some cucumbers up here we need to pick off the plant. And we've got this other type of cucumber growing here too. Take a look, it's got these little leaves, little vines, lots and lots of little vines leading to little tiny fruits. Look at the size of that fruit. That's a tiny thing right there. See if I can't get it to focus. It'll get a little bit bigger than that, but probably not much. Little small Mexican gherkin cucumbers. I believe I got those seeds from Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company. I just thought they would be interesting to grow. And another cucumber down here. But yeah, it's almost time to call it good on the cucumber run and all of that. The kohlrabi as well. Get these beds cleared out. So we'll probably plant out some peas and some greens and all that sort of stuff for this fall. And one more quick look at our blood orange tree. Looking really nice this year. Putting out some really good green growth, some new branches and all of that. It's looking pretty good this year. And the last thing we're going to look at here is the side alleyway plots that we've got here. These are our blueberries growing. Blueberry plants are still growing pretty good. We did get a few, maybe a handful or two of blueberries this year. But I imagine next year's production is going to be a lot more, as they'll be in their third year of growth here in this space. We'll just make sure we get some nice acidic fertilizers for acidic types of plants. Maybe help boost some of the fruit growth that we get next year and get a lot more berries. Now down this way, we've got our two in-ground beds that had our cabbage growing in it. We've harvested all of the cabbage up, and what we're doing now is we're trying to plan and prepare for what we're going to grow in our fall gardens and utilizing this space. Now what I'm probably going to do is try to get some PVC or something like that in order to create covers, maybe do a plastic cover in order to protect some things that we can grow over the winter season as it gets colder, more towards the freezing temperatures and snow and all that sort of stuff. But if you got any ideas of those sort of plants or anything that we can grow in these sort of spaces, hit me up in the comment section below and let me know what you think that we could grow here. I'm open for some ideas, as we'll get planting here real soon after the Heirloom Expo and get into our fall gardening, and we'll do some videos on fall gardening. That's the same thing with this bed here. Check this out. Now, in one of my previous years of growing potatoes, I must have had one of the little potatoes mixed into some of the soil that I ended up putting into this box here. Other than that, I'm not too sure how this potato plant got here, but it's all of a sudden starting to pop up out of the soil. Really starting to grow. I just noticed this the other day, but I guess we'll see if we get some potatoes growing in the ground here in the next couple of months. That's kind of a little surprise volunteer potato plant. Sure do love volunteers though. So alright, that concludes our 2019 summer garden tour here on the Urban Gardener. I hope you really enjoyed checking out a lot of the really great things that we've got growing on here this year. And as I mentioned earlier, and I've mentioned in plenty of other episodes before, as we've gotten into growing this season, I wasn't too happy about how things got started, but at this point in time, I'm really encouraged about where things are and where they're going to be going for next season. Because it's that point in time of year when we're really looking at all of the things that we're growing in our garden. We're looking at how they're doing, we're looking at what's the progress, and being able to take those sort of things, make notes on them, and think about what we're going to be growing next year and how well and what we're going to do to prepare for some of the disadvantages that we had ran into this year. So hopefully next year, based on some of the things we've learned, we'll have an even better garden grow, and we'll have even more cool things growing in our gardens, and hopefully a lot more production, because that's really the value of having a great urban garden like this, is getting some great production to be able to grow some of your own food so that you can provide yourself with some things right out of your own backyard and alleyway spaces like we've got here, or if you've just got a back patio or something as well, like we have too. You can grow out of a lot of great spaces as we show here on the Urban Gardener, and I hope that you continue to watch more episodes as we keep growing on. We're going to move on towards our fall gardening coming up here just as soon as we get back from the National Heirloom Expo. So we look forward to those upcoming episodes as we head down to California for the great National Heirloom Expo. It's going to be a great time, so I look forward to seeing you all along with me on those upcoming videos. But for now, please hit that thumbs up button and give this video a big like. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything at all about our summer garden tour, what we may be growing in the future, or anything like that, hit me up in that comment section down below. And like I said at the very beginning, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. In fact, hit the bell notification so you can be notified of upcoming episodes of the Urban Gardener as we continue growing here. And I'll see you all on our next episode. With more garden. We did say that already. So let's do that. All right. That's which we'll talk about in our next episode. We'll wait for this airplane to get by. I'll put an iCard right above here. All right, let's try that again. We might be actually getting good at this. That was another one take. All right. All right. I like that.